there.
Okay, we're
Going live.
we're going on YouTube.
Okay.
And the moment we start on YouTube, is when we there we go.
Is that little window that says meeting is now streaming live on YouTube ever going to go away? Oh, there it goes. Okay, good.
Mm-hmm.
It's gone.
I'm in such a hurry.
It's gone. Okay. I'm going to spotlight myself and get this microphone a little bit out of here. Good morning, everybody. Happy Easter. Welcome to Community Church. I have 3 poems to start the day. The first one is by Woody Guthrie. This morning I am born again. Light shines through the land, and I do not seek a heaven in some deathly distant land. No longer desire a pearly gates, nor want a street of gold. I do not want a mansion, for my heart is never cold. My heart is never cold. This morning I am born again. I am whole, new, complete. I am overcome all my sins. I stand on my own 2 feet. I am life unlimited, my body as the sky. I am at home in the universe where yonder planets fly, where yonder planets fly. This morning I am born again. My past is dead and gone. This great eternal moment, my great eternal dawn, I'd give myself, my heart, my soul, to give some friend a hand. This morning I am born again. I'm in the promised land. I am in the promised land.
Right
Spring
on.
again. I saw the old man in his garden, inched his rocky way down dark brown rows. And as the years and stiff joints have made it hard for him, still he's out on the first warm day, just ready to go. Every day I've seen him out on that first warm day, just ready to go. He's ready to dig, he's ready to seed, he's ready to water and ready to weed. He'll prune and pick and spade. He will move so slowly, it'll take him all day. And the next one too. Whatever gets done will have to do. Might be just 1 and it might be 2 rows that he gets done today. Got to take them as they come your way. Take them one by one today. At the end of each day, I see him on his front step, leans on his wooden cane in the last rays of sunset. And as the colors darken on a brand new garden, getting smaller every year, I will stand amazed at a man's last days as the twilight draws near. He must be thinking rain, he must be hoping sun, must be dreaming greener gardens. Is this his last one? You can see him growing slower, but the grace of a garden grower. When I am old, I want to stand in a garden. I want to gaze on the work of my hand. When I grow tired and slow, may I rest assured that the fruit of this work is the bounty of this land. I want to leave it a better place. I want to give it more than I take. I want to go gently. And I'll be thinking rain, I'll be hoping sun, I'll be dreaming greener gardens when it's my last one. You can see we're growing slower, but the grace of a garden grower. The grace of a garden grower. Oh, source of life, flow through us now, suffuse our minds this hour, renew our hopes, increase our faith through our creative powers. The first one was written by Woody Guthrie. The second one was written by me. And the third one is kind of like something that came out of community church. It's kind of like our doxology that was sung every Sunday. It changed lyrics over the years, but it was mostly that same one. Oh, source of life, flow through us now. I thought I'd share it with you. It's of a kind of a, what is it called? A scansion, where it could go. Oh, source of life, flow through us now, suffuse our minds this hour. Or it could go. Oh, source of life, flow through us now, suffuse our minds this hour. Or it could go. O source of life, flow through us now. Suffuse our minds this hour. I think that's my favorite one. Renew our hopes, increase our faith through our creative powers. But I don't know. Over the years, it was always in the program, those lyrics for people to sing. And back in the day, Community Church of Boston met in Symphony Hall and might have had like sometimes 2,000 people would come to hear the likes of W.E.B. Du Bois, Martin Luther King, Krishnamurti, Robert Frost. It was just this incredible thing. And can you imagine a sea of 2,000 people singing that song together to a tune that I don't know which tune it was. I have to ask Tilly Teixeira. She's maybe our longest standing member. She got married in this church in the 50s. What melody it was that they sang to that little doxology kind of thing. Welcome everybody and good morning. We are on the Zoom and we are on the YouTube and ready to greet the day and greet the springtime and greet the renewal of life. Greet the daffodils and greet Oen Kennedy. I'm so glad that Oen is joining us this morning. He's a longtime friend of mine and I'm his biggest fan. I love his songs about nature and about birds and about freedom and about all kinds of things that you're about to hear about. Oen Kennedy comes to us from Eastport, Maine today, and we're just so glad you're with us, Oen. I think for the first time on Zoom, you were here before live, if I'm not mistaken.
You're correct.
Patrick Square, but that was a long time ago, and now is now. So, Oen, thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks for inviting me, Dean. I'm very excited about today because my friend Scott is one of my you are both two of my main inspirations in this world. So, hey, I'm going to sing you a song about a compost pile. Something growing out of the compost pile. Something growing out of the compost pile. Something growing out of the compost pile. I'm gonna get down and see what it is. I'm gonna get down and see what it is. Oh yeah. If you get down close, you can see the earth is moving. If you get down close, you can see the earth is moving. If you get down close, you can see the earth is moving. There's tiny organisms in the ground. Tiny organisms moving around. Oh yeah. Something growing out of the compost pile. Something growing out of the compost pile. Something growing out of the compost pile. I'm gonna get down and see what it is. I'm gonna get down and see what it is. Oh yeah. The first leaves out don't tell you the name. The first leaves out don't tell you the name. The first leaves out don't tell you the name. But they're tiny and beautiful and green. The most perfect little leaves you've ever seen. Oh yeah. Something growing out of the compost pile. Something growing out of the compost pile. Something growing out of the compost pile. I'm gonna get down and see what it is. I'm gonna get down and see what it is. Oh yeah. Oh look, it's a great big worm. Oh look, you can see him squirm. His body is made for moving in the earth, and he never makes a single sound. The silent king of the underground. Oh yeah. Something growing out of the compost pile. Something growing out of the compost pile. Something growing out of the compost pile. I'm gonna get down and see what it is. I'm gonna get down and see what it is. Oh yeah. Wait, there's a human in the compost pile. She's messing around with the great big smile. She's picking up a limpy, wilty celery bunch, and she's gonna make soup for tomorrow's lunch. Oh, celery soup that grows crunch, crunch, crunch. Something growing out of the compost pile. Something growing out of the compost pile. Something growing out of the compost. I'm gonna get down and see what it is. I'm gonna get down and see what it is. I'm gonna get down and see what it is. What it is. Oh yeah, what it is. Give me some compost.
Thank you, Owen.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Owen.
Thank you. Let me put myself up here. Reminded me of Lee Hayes. You remember Lee Hayes? He says, bury my ashes in the compost pile, and then you can grow me into vegetables, and then you can eat me. And then when you pass me, you can say, there goes old Lee again.
That was awesome.
I have a candle to light here. And this is a candle of deep sadness about what we just found out, the passing of Carolyn Poinelli. Carolyn, all of you longtime members know, she was one of our most fastidious attendees at Community Church. Carolyn, very fiercely independent, fiercely opinionated political person with just a deep loyalty to this place, regardless of when she agreed or disagreed with our views, our speakers, our opinions. Longtime activist on the Palestine front, and especially on the food front. Very disciplined person about her diet and about her exercise regimen. Carolyn was hit by a car and didn't recover from her injuries. We had missed Carolyn for about 5 weeks now. Did not know what was going on. Dan, who is with us today, Dan the Bagel Man, went to her house yesterday to sort of sleuth out what was going on, left her a note, and then Googled her, and up came the obituary from a few weeks ago. She is survived by a family. She has several siblings and nephews and nieces, but we haven't been in touch with them. Carolyn lived in a kind of marginal living situation where she was sort of living at the convenience of an absentee landlord who owned several apartments, and she lived in one of the apartments that didn't have utilities, so she was out on the street very much, always attending incredible number of political events all over the city, walked and walked and walked and walked everywhere, and was here at Community Church all the time. We're going to miss Carolyn a lot. In fact, Carolyn never joined Community Church, but finally decided to join. She's the most recent listing in our membership book. She finally decided, I think her reluctance to join was sort of about anarchism, about something or other, I'm not sure what, but she is now a deceased member of Community Church, and we will miss you, Carolyn. We would like to coordinate with her family to to put together a fitting tribute memorial to Carolyn. So Carolyn Poinelli presente, that's what we say. And everybody says presente. Carolyn Poinelli presente.
Presente.
Thank you. She was 73 years old.
Presente.
Presente. Dan, who brought us this news, would you like to say a word at this point by any chance?
Okay.
About Carolyn?
Okay. I've known Carolyn since the 90s when I did Food Not Bombs with her. And she was a great person helping out in the kitchen. She made sure every pot was washed, that we didn't leave the kitchen at St. Paul's Cathedral. So everything was clean in the kitchen. And then she came up and she was like me. We didn't touch the food. So all the homeless people had to have their share first. And then if there was any food left over, Carolyn was very dedicated to Food Not Bombs with us for years. I've known her ever since. And she used to come to the community church on New Year's Eve and help make hot chocolate to raise money for Boston Food for Activists for first night against all wars. She was dedicated to making hot chocolate at the church for years. She puts her heart into it. And it's sad that we didn't, that she passed this way. So it's going to be, I'll miss her. And I think we're all going to be thinking of her for the next couple of days or weeks or how long. She was a great influence and a great support. So right now I'm wrapping pastries and doing what I do. So I can go out and feed the homeless today in Copley, even if I can. So for Carolyn, I'll dedicate today to her and her memories and our memories of her.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Carolyn, you are well remembered. Thanks, Dan. And good luck getting to Copley today.
Come back to the
Because
I'm trying to read it.
somebody is unmuted. Because Copley is consumed with the Boston Marathon today, and it's hard to get there from here from anywhere right at this point. Lots of streets blocked off, lots of activity, lots of people on the streets running. No hotel room open within probably 15 blocks of Copley Square. Center of the universe right here. I want to tell you one more concern to share, which is Tommy Rosa. Tommy used to be one of our 10 members behind bars, but count my fingers, now 3 of them have been released. First it was Arnie King, and then it was Tommy Rosa, and most recently it was Lee Underwood, who was just like 2 weeks ago. And we are trying to learn this thing about support for recently released incarcerated people. And it's a whole project, ministry unto itself that we're coming to get acquainted with and coming to also embrace as just a really noble thing. And I hope you all will help us figure out how to do that. Tommy, I want to mention to you, had a stroke. He's a year and a half out of prison, exonerated after 25 years in of a crime he did not commit. The Innocence Project took up his case and got him out. Unfortunately, he's had this really setback of a stroke and is partially paralyzed on one side. And I don't know all the details because I haven't gotten a chance to call him, but I wanted to let you know that there is a GoFundMe page that his daughter has put up. You can find it by just Googling free but not free on GoFundMe, and you'll find the name Tommy Rosa, R-O-S-A. I will try to find the specific link and put it in the chat while this program is going on. I just want to tell you a couple more community church things. First is that we are deluged with the books which are the legacy of Bob Datilio. We're slowly sifting through them and categorizing them and putting them back in boxes, cataloging them photographically and numbering the boxes so that we will eventually take them back out and make them part of a library, or be able to give them away or sell them, or offer them to researchers. It's probably 3,000-4,000 books. I don't know how to count them, but we have a lot of books, and we're especially trying to get rid of and store a lot of them because we need our auditorium back. We are starting to have specifically physical events back here, and we invite you to join us physically back when Copley Square can be accessed easily. Next Friday is the first one I want to tell you. Her name is Jen Marlow. She is a documentary filmmaker. She has focused especially on Palestine, Gaza, and the West Bank. You can find her work at Donkey Saddle Productions, and you can come hear her live in person along with her next, her right-hand woman, who's named Abigail Haddad, and they will both be here. Gabrielle Haddad, I'm sorry. They will both be here, and we will have one of our first hybrid events where we are live in person with people here. You can come early. You can enjoy pupusas, which is a Salvadoran delicacy that a lot of you know about, or you can come right at 7 and attend, or tune in at 7. Either one of those ways of accessing that event Friday. Sunday, I'm not remembering what the program is, but we'll be here again. And oh yes, and then the Sunday after that is why I thought about this. We will have another specifically physical event. Steve Kellerman said, I will not do this Zoom stuff. Steve Kellerman is a longtime member and also a former board member of Community Church. He's a retired machinist, and he's also a longtime member of the IWW Wobbly, and he's a fine labor historian, and he's going to give us a talk on May 1st, International Labor Day, on the life and times and work of Eugene V. Debs. That should be a marvelous performance, or a marvelous talk, and I hope you come physically to attend here at Community Church of Boston in Boylston Street in Copley Square. Okay, that's a few announcements, and I'm sure that while Owen gives us a couple of songs, I'll think of a couple of more announcements to share with you. I was going to see if I could find, man, while I have this dude with me, Owen.
Yo, you want me to do another song?
Yes, 2 songs. But first, tell me, what's this?
Which one? That's a house wren. That right there is a house sparrow. That little cheep. But that other sound you heard is a house wren. Yeah.
House wren.
Yeah.
That seems to be the one that's the morning bird predominating around our house. It's not the Carolina wren that graced our morning for the last couple of years. Carolina wren seemed to have gone away a little bit. Now it's house.
House wrens, Troglodytes aedon, are very comfortable in urban and suburban environments.
As I am not.
Okay, here we go. Let this song be a loon. Let it swim and sing under the moon. Let its feathers zip up tight for an underwater flight into deep blue. Let this water always be clear. Let its inspiration always be here. Let me understand the sound of the water flowing down over a million stones. If it comes to me in the midnight hour, will I answer to its call? Will I wake up from the dream that I'd been living? Will it keep my heart open? Will it strengthen my devotion for the light? This morning a loon called my name, and I'm overjoyed I'll never be the same. I can still see the light and the waning of the night and the morning star. And this loon has given a chance to my soul who was waiting to dance like a child in the sun on a naked joyous run into the water's arms. And it came to me in the midnight hour, answered its call, and I woke up from the night living, and I kept my heart open like a shiny wavy ocean in the moonlight. Thank you. Right back at you.
You got another one for us, Owen?
Oh, another one. Okay, yes. Sure.
Yeah,
I'll
cool.
do my newest song. And this one's about a canyon wren. I don't know if any of you have ever seen or experienced a canyon wren, but you know, since we're on the subject of wrens with the house wren and the Carolina wren, this is a cousin of them that lives up in the mountains out west, and it has a beautiful song, and the way the plumage is on the bird is just so sweet and wonderful, and so I'm hoping to see one again one of these days, and here we go. Let me just turn that up a touch. Sorry. There goes the canyon wren, bouncing on that rock again, expanding with morning light, ready to sing. Everything about him pulls on my heartstrings, never seen anyone as fetching as him. Lovely color shadings, bedappled and bespeckled, golden light deepens his bedazzling tail. I would wait forever just to catch a glimpse of him, let go all my words just to hear him sing. Echoing through the world, crystalline and sweet, adding magic shimmer to the sycamore trees, cascading perfection, tickling my ears, liquid spirit awakening my soul. Woo. I think I want to live there in the quiet canyon, water coming down from the mountain springs. Canyon wren is my friend, connected on the spirit plane. He and I both like to wake up and sing. croaking and I'm squeaking more and more with singing. As my voice gets lower and grungier and bare, he will always sound sweet, stronger than a mighty man, speaking to open hearts everywhere. Echoing through the world's crystalline and sweet, adding magic shimmer to the sycamore trees, cascading perfection, tickling my ears, liquid spirit wakening my soul.
Oh, thank you, Owen. It's a beautiful new
pleasure.
song.
Thank you.
Beautiful new song coming to us from Eastport, Maine. I had forgotten what next Sunday's program is, and I want to tell you about it. We have two powerful women talking about climate action now. And these are two longtime friends of mine. One is named Laura Burns. She was in the group Flor de Caña, and also previous to that in the group that sang many times at community church, Roger Rosen, Laura Burns, Burns and Rosen, they were called. And Laura was a selectman or woman in the town of Hingham, and now is just completely devoted to climate mitigation action on the city level. A lot of different initiatives that she's in charge of. And then there's Kate Crosby, who does a very similar task for the town of Acton, Massachusetts, about an hour west of here. And Kate Crosby is you could call it more climate action, climate healing, because Kate Crosby in an earlier life was a nurse, and she transitioned into being an engineer for the city of Acton, figuring out how to save tons of money and how to keep tons of carbon out of the atmosphere. And we need initiatives on every level, from the microscopic level of one house, one building, like what we're doing here, trying to do step at a time for this 5-story commercial building in Copley Square. And the same thing at home. Kate is doing it at a town level, and it should be at a county and state and country and planet level as well, all at once in every way that we can. So that's Kate Crosby. Kate Crosby's.
I have him in the corner, and I can hear him talking, but I can't get him big on the screen. So anyway, let's try.
That was Dave Lewitt. I just muted you, Dave. I'm sorry. It was coming out to everybody. So that's next week. Kate Crosby and Laura Burns, and music by Kate's husband, whose name you might recognize, Eric Kilburn, who's sung here a bunch of times. He's my studio engineer and also wonderful,
good buddy,
author of many wonderful songs. So this morning on Easter, I would like to introduce you all to Scott Vlaun. And this was by suggestion of Oen Kennedy that we do this program with Scott. And thank you, Owen, for that suggestion. This program is driven by your ideas. Every one of the programs this spring has been by suggestion of some member or non-member of community church, ideas that we take in, investigate, and outreach and find out if those people are willing and able. And we are very lucky that this morning the answer was yes, willing and able. Scott Vlaun, let me tell you about him, but I will give Owen the last word as far as introduction. Scott Vlaun is the director of the Center for an Ecology-Based Economy in Norway, Maine, and a founding board member of Maine Climate Action NOW, NOW, capitalized, exclamation point. Since 2013, CEBE, Center for an Ecology-Based Economy, has been working for a just transition to a post-fossil fuel economy in rural Western Maine and beyond. Scott, it's very nice to meet you, and thank you for being with us. And I'm going to leave it to Owen to do the final words of introduction for Scott.
I would just say that Scott is my buddy, my spirit brother, and he taught me so much in the years that I lived in Norway, Maine area. And the most important thing is that you just need to get out there and uh, devote your life to healing this planet. And of course, that's been my mission, forever with my music and other projects that I've been involved in. But for Scott, he's the one that showed me the permacultural lens with which to look at the universe. And it is a way in which we are creatively adding nourishment back into the planet so that we can be in that harmonious cycle with the other living beings with whom we share this beautiful earth. And he is a source of inspiration for me and always will be. And I'm very glad he is here today to share with us his knowledge and wisdom.
Oh, thank you so much, Owen. That was very sweet. And it's so great to hear you play again, my dude. It's been too long.
Right on.
I need to get you down to Norway. And thanks, Dean, for inviting me and making this happen. And thank you all for being here. It was mentioned, it is Easter Sunday, and I won't be talking about resurrection so much, but I will be talking about some other of those great R words like resistance and regeneration and renewal. And I just heard from Dean that one of my great heroes was a big member of this church and spoke here maybe 30 times, Scott Nearing, who, if it wasn't for Scott Nearing and reading Living the Good Life, probably 40 years ago or so, I certainly wouldn't be doing what I'm doing today, and probably wouldn't be here talking to you all. So I've been involved in climate activism and organizing for about the last decade or so. Reluctantly, it's not what I ever planned to do with my life, but given the circumstances of where our planet's heading and the fact that I had a small child, and my own, just my own privilege as an educated, white male in our society, I felt like it, if I didn't step up, who would? And got together with a few other people, and we started CEBE. Interestingly, as our work as climate organizers has kind of evolved, it's, less of doing this sort of thing, less of talking, more of listening and facilitating conversations for people. But I'm also a teacher. I teach permaculture, and I used to teach photography a lot, and I've done some storytelling. So I'll give it a go and see what I can share with you guys today. So I'm a photographer by trade, really. For the last most of my adult life, I've made at least all or part of my living as a photographer. And only in the last year, really, I've been full-time in this work. My board asked me to step up and take on CEBE as full-time director. And before that, I was half-time and three-quarter time. So I always had some other side gigs going. And at this moment, I don't. This is really what I'm doing full-time. I've also worked in my life as a writer and a teacher. I've done permaculture design. I used to have a market garden here and grow food for the community. And I've also done a lot of building along the way as well. It's kind of a classic Mainer thing. You got to cobble a bunch of stuff together if you want to make a living up here. But like I said, just recently we've built CEBE to the point where I can work full time. So I grew up in Connecticut, on the coast, about the same amount south from you guys as I am now north. And I grew up working at a marina and being on the water all the time, and in boats and riding bikes and skiing. And I actually moved to Maine in 1980, and partially as a climate refugee, didn't really know it. I just started to realize that, when I hit my 20s, it started raining a lot more in Connecticut than it was snowing as it did when I was a little kid. And being a skier and all, it's like I better head north, and had no idea that it was, the planet was actually warming. So here I am, still in Maine. I did take a hiatus for about 10 years. I went out to New Mexico, studied photography there, and came back here by way of New York City. So I guess what I want to talk about a little bit today is as a climate organizer, someone who's doing climate work and I'm not alone at all in this, is the big question for all of us is starting to be like, how can we stay the course in this work? How can we be, effective organizers over the long haul, which obviously this is, and how to do that and escalate that pressure for change. When every day, the more we look at it, the stakes are getting higher, the odds are getting a little longer that we actually do what needs to be done to stem this. And, just how to hold that existential crisis of climate change in one hand, and then on the other hand, this profound joy and beauty of being alive on this miracle of a planet. And I think your music kind of, is a big part of expressing that joy. It's so important to be able to have that. So I was thinking about, talking today, that's kind of what I was, has just been coming up a lot for me. And actually saw a buddy of mine yesterday who's not at all involved in climate work. And he said something about like, heavy rain coming Tuesday, we're going to get a couple inches of rain. And I was like, well, because talking about climate is like every chance I get is just kind of what I do. And I think it's what we all need to be doing, kind of is using any opportunity we can to just talk about this crisis. But I said, well, Daryl, like, so we get 75% more of those extreme weather events than we did 50 years ago, according to the Maine Climate Institute. And I could see him like going, whoa, that sucks. And then he was like, yeah, but think of how beautiful it's going to be up in the mountains with all the water running down the streams. And I was like, yeah, you're right. And we do need to get out there and, and enjoy that and sort of figure out how to navigate that. So I'll start a little bit on how I got to be directing, a climate action group when I started out, wanting to be an artist, basically. And, we've been here for 9 years, which I guess if you're talking about a small nonprofit grassroots organization in rural Western Maine, it's like people would say, well, that's pretty good. You're successful. And, we've been able to grow every year and increase our, staff hours. But, by no means would I say that we or any other climate action organization in the world is really successful at this point, because we are losing ground every day. So I moved up to Maine in 1976 briefly to study environmental science. I always had like a real connection with nature and thought, I'd be great to work in nature as park ranger, something like that. And but I was really passionate about arts. My parents wouldn't support me to go to art school, but they would support me to go to study something practical like environmental science. I lasted about a year, found myself in the art room and in the dark room all the time, and really just committed myself to wanting to study art. So I ended up going back home to Connecticut, worked in a factory for a while. Then I was delivering mail for a while, and finally came back to Maine, went to Portland School of Art, and was able to really focus on my passion, which was painting and photography, and soon kind of I majored in photography, became very enamored with documentary photography. Even as a young kid, one of my first photo magazines had Eugene Smith's Minimata images in it, and I just realized the power of the visual image to make change and work for social justice. And some of the pretty much all the major social justice movements of the last century plus have all had a major photography component. You think of Vietnam, think of child labor laws, things like that, and of course still does. Without the images coming out of Ukraine right now, I don't think we would be thinking about it in the same way. And also, like, being in art school, there's other ways that this has kind of fed my work, and one is just thinking of design. Like we talked, the school I went to was heavy design based, and some of the same language that we used in just designing some of the same language we use in the environmental movement or in the climate movement of being, more economical and communicating, like really clearly, and wholeness and balance and all these things that we talked about in art school that were, kind of make sense at a larger scale. It's also really, we spent a lot of time drawing, and this iterative process of drawing was really powerful for me. And this is like getting rid of the idea of the preconceived idea, like knowing the product before you went through the process is very process based. And I think that's really helped my way of navigating this small little nonprofit in this, kind of underserved area where, we're always like looking at where we are and what opportunities are there, and not trying to like march forward to some, a goal as much as responding to what's happening around us in the same way. If I was doing a drawing, I'd be responding to that last set of marks. And it's like, oh, now I have different information. So, and just kind of that iterative process, I think, is really important. And that, I think I hear that coming up, again and again in the movement these days. And there was also like that heady notions of like, we were in art school and we're all in our, like early 20s, and this notion of like, seeking the truth, this like deep embedded truths through, like exploration, and like, I was studying Edward Weston, and, this like notion of like seeing the thing itself, and really like breaking down a lot of, ideas and getting to these really simple but profound truths. Also, there's that comfort in complexity. The more you seek, the more you realize how complicated, and there's always more questions than answers, and just kind of finding some comfort in that. And of course, we had a BFA program, and I did a lot of writing, and we had a really great ethics course there as well, that has kind of informed my work down the road. So when I got out of art school, I ended up working in a photo lab here as an exhibition printer, and just had this, like, again, just kind of serendipitously, but had this great fortune of being able to work for some of the great photojournalists of our time. A photographer from National Geographic discovered us and, really liked how we were printing, and then brought his friends, and ended up building a relationship with a few of those photographers, one in particular who's a war photographer, James Noctway. And I ended up printing his work for a really long time, and just, through that work, just understood how powerful images could be to change the world. By the way, he's now 74 years old, and he's in Ukraine and making some of the most powerful photographs of his life at this point, and raising that awareness. So after that, and I realized this wasn't my career path. I wasn't going to be a lifetime exhibition printer, but it was like just one of the most educational, just being able to work with these photographers and really understand that this was more about, that's finding this balance between the content, and in some cases, again, it was just like this duality of like working with Jim's images. They're some of the most horrific things. I don't know if anybody's seen his stuff in the New Yorker recently, Dispatch from Bucha. These images are really hard to look at, but there's also this like underlying beauty, and being his printer and printing of images of this, these horrors, and trying to make these prints as beautiful as possible was this, just, again, it's like a crazy duality to try to hold these things simultaneously. So I got a little burnt out on that, and decided to go to graduate school. I went out to New Mexico, to the University of New Mexico, and thought at the time that I would want to teach photography at some point. But going from a traditional kind of art school to a university program like this, it really kind of blew a lot of my notions about how photography worked out of the water, this literal interpretation of images. This was like in the late 80s, early 90s, and semiotics was all the rage. And we were just really trying to understand how meaning was actually even formed, like in any kind of language, whether it's a visible language like photography or painting or advertising or whatever, or spoken language, written language. It's like, that language, that meaning is always slipping and sliding, and it's based on the context of how you're seeing that information and your own experience. And it's this meaning is formed out of this very dynamic situation. I think that's been a great understanding for me as I've worked through different things in life. This notion of just like verisimilitude is something that people always talk about in photography, and it's it's like, it's a myth. It's not like, they don't like the object, the image is not the object, and the map is not the territory kind of thing. It's like these are all just signs. They're just references for something that's happening in the real world. Not to say that literal translation of images can't be very powerful too. One of my heroes at that time was this woman photographer named Susan Misalis, who some of you may have heard of. She made a book called Nicaragua, on the Nicaraguan Revolution. She embedded herself with the Sandinistas in 1978 and just made this really profound book out of it. And I admit I became a little infatuated with the whole Sandinista revolution because of her. But one of the images she made, and this kind of just points out this context and meaning thing, was when the Sandinistas took power, as they would go into villages and take control of a village, they would go into the food stores that the Somoza regime had basically locked down, and it was basically keeping people, kind of starve people into submission in a way. And the Sandinistas would open these food stores and just, give the food to people. And, I remember seeing in one place, there's like huge bags of rice, but they were handing the food out to people. And that, was just a kind of a triumphant image of the revolution. And then 2 years later, that same image was used in World News and Report to show, quote unquote, food rationing in Nicaragua. Same photograph, completely opposite intention of how it was made, but was used to illustrate a competing idea. So that just made me a little wary of this notion of like, if you take a picture, it has this meaning that's going to carry through its life. It puts the responsibility back on the photographer. And also, just for me, it just really brings up this notion of authorship. Like, I don't trust a photograph unless it has an author and somebody who I can trust, and whether it's the person who made it, the person who's putting that, I think, before we see the disinformation that's in our world now. So that's just kind of been a lesson for me. And also the thing with photography that's so different now is this immediacy. Like, I ended up writing my dissertation in grad school on documentary photography in the digital age, and this notion that somebody can make a photograph, and that photograph can be all over the world in really minutes these days, whereas back years and years ago, it would have taken days for that film to get to a lab and for an editor to go through it and all of that stuff. So I ended up, when I was in graduate school, there was a New Mexico construction brigade to Nicaragua in Albuquerque when I was there. And I was like, wow, that sounds pretty cool. And I've done a lot of building and thought I could be involved in that. So I went to some meetings, and they asked me like almost immediately if I would go to Nicaragua to photograph a sister community there that they were just building a relationship with. And I was like, whoa, okay, could do that. And also because I'd done some construction work, if I could help them identify a project that they could do. So off I went to Nicaragua with like my Spanish phrase book. And actually there was a woman who I met there who's a translator and translated for me for a few days, and just was like blown away. This was 1988, or was it 88 or spring of 89? I guess it was the spring of 89, and the Sandinistas were still in power there. And it was just like, shocking for me, the poverty that people were living in, but it was also shocking that people were generally pretty happy and incredibly generous. And I made some really, great relationships there, and, ended up making these pictures, brought them back to New Mexico. They raised a bunch of money. They went down there and built a school. It was like, kind of a highlight for me to be able to use photography in a positive way like that, and see some, real change happening from it. That became my MA thesis project. I ended up writing stories about all the photographs to make sure that the people didn't misinterpret what they were looking at. And I even had Margaret Randall came and spoke at my opening. Some of you probably know her from those years. She's did a lot of activism around that Central American politics. I ended up going back again 2 years later because I wanted to go back and visit these folks, and I wanted to bring photographs back, and I wanted to, have an exchange. And I brought photographs from my community there for them to see as well. And this was after the Chamorro government, U.S.-backed government, had taken power, and we basically, just funded their election and, put $15 for every Nicaraguan into their election to make sure that the Sandinistas lost power, and basically threatened, if you don't vote for this government, we'll just keep supplying guns and into your communities and into your country until you give up. So, and I got to say, when I got there, it was shocking to me in a way to see, like, there was a lot of, like, you could buy big screen TV, you could buy, pretty much anything you wanted. There were new cars on the street in Managua. But when I got out to the countryside, to Rama, where I had been working, I was just struck by, like, the kind of, like, poverty and hunger. And, there was kind of like a famine going on in places that had been, strident against, the Contra war, against this new government, were basically being neglected. And, I felt like I was in, sub-Saharan Africa or something, or as kids with bloated bellies, and, so many widows of so many, broken souls from that protracted conflict. And I just really couldn't function very well in this environment, and just emotionally, it was just like, I realized, like, maybe this isn't the kind of work that I could ever do, even though I knew people that were in this field, just working in that kind of situation, I probably just didn't have the stomach for it. So I ended up back in New Mexico, and, again, just, used the photographs, and it was all fine, but it's kind of looking for another way to use photography and for good. Ended up, to make a living, I was shooting food, like shooting cookbooks, and I started shooting architecture. I was still doing printing, little, building work on the side whenever I needed to. And then one day, my partner at the time came home from work. She was working for this little seed company in Santa Fe called Seeds of Change. She said, "Hey, Scott, they're looking for a photographer to take pictures of some vegetables for the seed packs," because they were going from, like, drawings to photos. And I was like, "Oh, that seems pretty simple." And I had a garden full of vegetables out there in the spring, all the spring greens and stuff. And so I ran out there with, loaded up cameras, and went out there and took pictures of kale and Bloomsdale spinach and Mizuna mustard, and brought them down to Nina Simon, who some of you may have heard of from the Bioneers. She was the vice president of Seeds of Change at the time. And she said, "Oh, we can use this one and this one and this one. And when can you leave?" I'm like, "What do you mean leave?" She's like, "Well, we've got all these plants growing at all our seed growers on the West Coast of the United States, from, like, between San Francisco and Portland. They had like a dozen seed growers up in there. And they're like, you got to go to visit these farms and take pictures of these plants so we can get a seed rack. And, there's no way this company is going to make it if we don't have pictures of our stuff." So I'm like, all right. So headed out there, and I just really hadn't thought much about what I was getting myself into. And I just went from this one organic seed farm to the next, and everybody had a story. Everybody had another story about the loss of our genetic diversity, and how our, like, the whole food system was under threat from all of these, varieties being lost to the trade, and big seed companies were buying up the little ones and getting rid of all this diversity. And then other people were talking about, the plunging aquifers and losing topsoil, and like this industrial agriculture model being so unsustainable, and like, whoa. And then, what started coming into the conversation occasionally was like this climate issue. It's like, well, we can't rely on the rains. We're having to irrigate more and drilling deeper, and the aquifers are sinking. And it was just like, I'm realizing as I'm doing this work that I thought was just taking pictures of, like vegetables and flowers, ended up being, this kind of profound, existential issue of humanity. If we can't feed ourselves, then, we're kind of in trouble. I ended up at Alan Capular's place up in Corvallis, Oregon. And this guy I spent a couple of days up there, and he's like a genius molecular biologist, and also like probably Jerry Garcia's biggest fan ever. And just kind of brought these worlds together, but he just really schooled me on how important it was to, the seeds, what was in seeds, and how important it was to save seeds and understand this whole cycle of our food system. And so I ended up doing this work for a really long time, and I traveled all over the West, and I started just not photographing the plants, but doing interviews with all these seed growers and photographing them and learning their stories. And, the more I traveled and met, the more aware I became of like how untenable our food system is. And it's really like, some people say we have like 50 years left of being able to basically mine the land the way we are, to extract, from it to support this industrial food system. And it's really about profit over people and planet on every level. So I felt like, I'd really kind of found the revolution I was looking for. Like, it wasn't, guns and bombs and running around in the countryside, of some, random country. It was this was a revolution that, I felt like I could really be part of. And I felt like after a while I became the head propagandist for the organic seed movement. And I would show up at all their conferences and show these pictures of these seed growers and tell stories about them. Another thing that came up in those years, I started writing more for the company and doing a lot of product stuff and book reviews. And some of you may know who Bill Mollison is, one of the founders of permaculture. One day I was in New Mexico at their Cedar Change research farm, and somebody said, "Hey, there's a guy that wrote that book in there, the big permaculture book, and you should go interview him, because he's never going to give any more interviews, but he'll give us an interview, because we just agreed to buy like a cubic meter of the permaculture designer's manual and have it shipped from Australia. And we were going to sell these at a discount and promote his book and promote permaculture and all this stuff." And because of that, he would offer this interview. And I ended up sitting down with this guy 3 hours. He just I would ask him 2 sentences and he would give me 2 pages of just mind-blowing stuff, like over and over. And the interview it's actually on our website still to this day. And it ended up getting translated into a couple languages because nobody had heard from him in a while. And he had a lot to say, but it really, kind of blew my mind. Permaculture, Owen mentioned it. It's full of great little phrases and axioms and principles. And one of my favorite ones is the problem is the solution. And, if you look at our agriculture system, the problem with our agriculture is cows and pigs and chickens and soybeans and corn. And the reason it's a problem is because cows and pigs and chickens are all locked in these factories, and we're cutting down the rainforest to grow corn and soybeans, and we're tilling the Midwest and dumping chemicals all over our soil and plants to grow corn and soybeans to feed the animals that are stuck in these factories that are creating this waste. And you can take those same elements, and this is where like that design comes in. You have these elements, and you switch that around and you put those animals onto the landscape, and they can start to regenerate soil, and they may not produce as much or make the kind of profit for a company, but I see it in my area here where people are using small flocks of grazing animals to like restore a lot of the pastures and stuff, and provide a little bit of protein, but not this kind of excess that we've grown into. And of course, one of the great models I've seen recently is regenerative poultry agriculture, where they literally use the chickens to grow the corn. So the chickens do all the fertilizing and all the weeding, and they love living under this canopy of corn because it's that chickens are jungle fowl and they like to be in the shade, and it's this symbiotic relationship. And then you get much more corn and without doing any spraying or fertilizing, chemical fertilizing and tilling and all that stuff. And it's just a simple like illustration of you could grow that corn chemically intensively with mechanically, and then feed it to those chickens that are locked in something. And you might make more money because it's a controlled thing, but you've broken this whole cycle. And it's permaculture is all about looking at how nature works, and the more we can kind of understand nature and emulate it in our food system. So this was all like kind of mind-blowing stuff for me, because it like never ever thought about most of this stuff. So it's the notion here is like you can shift from our food system from completely extractive and exploitive to regenerative, having the same components. So I did work in that food space, organic food and seed space, for almost 20 years as a writer and a photographer. And I had a big trial garden here as well. So I started to realize I could get better pictures of plants if I could grow myself. I could also provide a lot of data to the seed growers who were growing in completely other bioregions, and collected data and would say, hey, this variety, not that one, kind of look at stuff. It was a really exciting, very fulfilling work. I felt like it had a great mission. I love gardening and all of that. So it was good. Good run. Unfortunately, that company, as all things tend to, eventually got co-opted by a big corporation, which kind of stayed out of our way for a little while, and was losing a little money on it every year. Didn't seem to worry, but at some point they decided they just wanted to shut it down and buy seeds on the market, and got rid of a lot of their local growers and started selling seeds in Walmart and Home Depot, and kind of lost that kind of mission-driven thing. So at this point, my partner and I were like, okay, we realized that climate change was the threat of our lifetime and of this generation and generations to come, and we needed to do. And no one was talking about it, and we had already committed to this area. This is a rural conservative area of Maine, and we're like, okay, we need to take a stand here. We had communication skills. Again, I was a photographer, writer. My partner was a graphic designer. So we had a neighbor who's, was really into renewable energy and green building. Owen knows these folks, Sean and Seal. And the four of us decided we were going to start this organization here in Western Maine. And we, ended up coming up with this name, the Center for an Ecology-Based Economy. And we kind of stole an idea from in Vermont and Hardwick. They have the Center for an Agricultural Economy, but we wanted to kind of expand that out to more systems focus. And Sean and I had both done our permaculture designers course here with someone who had studied directly with Mollison. We were really into that, like understanding like the solutions are here. It's all about creating these interactions, and we were very excited. We'd done some transition training as well. So we figured we'd just start this organization. None of us had ever done anything like this before, but desperate times call for desperate measures. So we did a little fundraising campaign, Indiegogo, like Dean, I think you mentioned Indiegogo earlier, crowdfunding thing. And we raised a bunch of money, raised more than we even thought, we even asked for. And then all of a sudden here we were on our way, and we had this commitment to all these people, and little grant here, little grant there. And over the last 9 years, we've built CEBE into we have 2 full-time equivalent, was 3 staff members. And we have a board, which Owen used to be on. It's very active, very committed board. And we started projects in 4 different areas. We were really looking at the solutions to the climate crisis, more from kind of a technical side of things. We had a food working group, energy working group, transportation, and shelter. and our, food was kind of, the thing that I knew the most about, I think, and understood that relationship between food and climate. And we really started trying to support local regenerative agriculture, because, if we don't localize the food system, this industrial globalized food system will not, it's not going to be our solution. We need to get land back in the hands of local people and figure out an economy that makes it, possible for people to grow food for their community and survive. The energy front, obviously, we were looking at solar power, and most of us understood how that worked a little bit. It was still expensive at the time, but we did a project in solar. In our food working group, our first project was a community food forest with our community garden. We planted like tons of fruit and nut trees and did a lot of education around perennial polyculture, just to get kind of a conversation about food system stuff going. And the transport part, this is like kind of a little before electric cars, but we did a bike share program in our downtown. We just put a bunch of bikes on the street and had a couple of racks, and we still do that program. We also, I was really into hauling things on bikes, and since then we've started a bike hauling service that hauls trash and recycling in the community with a big trailer. I used to haul my produce with bikes, and we were really kind of big on bikes. We're working on a bike lane in the town now. Our shelter working group, it was a little, hard to do demonstration scale projects for shelter, but we did help some middle school kids build a greenhouse and kind of do a little skill building. Now we have this amazing program. Oh, and I don't know if you know Anna Heath, but she's on our board or just recently stepped down she's been doing this women-led carpentry workshops, and they've been just wildly popular, and now is leading up a weatherization program in the community and reskilling and skilling a lot of people that never thought would have the opportunity to, come into that kind of work through traditional channels. And we have been talking ever since day one about this kind of pipe dream of an eco village in our community. And we have a new group of younger folks that are pretty fired up about some affordable cooperative housing stuff that will maybe, who knows, maybe will lead us there. The thing that is the biggest, like the hardest sell, it's probably maybe the most important part of climate action these days is conservation, is just understanding that we're not going to like green our way out of this. We really need to use less. We need to change our lifestyle from this consumer lifestyle. And we're not going to just like switch every car out for an electric car and switch every house out, oil furnace for heat pumps, and just keep living the same way. And I don't know if anybody heard this on the radio the other day, but there's some study that just came out that showed that people globally that use about 1/4 of the energy of the average American are happier than people that consume more. It's like consuming does not make us happy. And somehow we've got, and I think, been working with a lot of youth lately, and I think that our youth are getting that. They're getting that picture, and they don't have the same like consumerist aspirations. And I find that really, really inspiring. And another part of our work here has been, especially in the early days and the Trump years, it was being on the streets. It's that resist piece. We've been to DC, we've been to New York for the huge climate marches. We've been, helped organize them in Portland. Even in Norway, once a little town, we had 200 people show up for a global climate strike. I think it's important, when the time is right, to get in the streets. And we've had 2 major rallies up in Augusta this year. And I think it's important to get out there and do that kind of work as well. One of the things as we went from like this demonstration scale stuff, so we were putting like solar panels over at the community garden to power irrigation system and little EV chargers and, here and there, and some, small solar stuff. And we realized if we wanted to like make major moves, like specifically in the solar, that we needed different policy. So for the last 5 years or so, we've been working our way more and more towards working on policy work in coalition with other organizations. So Maine Climate Action NOW that you mentioned, Dean, that's a coalition of 5 organizations. We recently joined the Environmental Priorities Coalition. And that's brought us into, being able to really make some change through policy work. And it's been amazing right now. We have a more progressive legislature and governor, and we've been able to have some really profound change in our public policy. Maine just adopted one of the best climate action plans of any state in the country. And also just building these networks, it seems so critical that we build networks on top of networks on top of networks to get to the scale of the climate movement, that the scale it needs to get to really be able to displace this other kind of collusion between government and corporations that is like just promoting this extractive economy and this profit over people and planet, and our government's like really criminal inaction to address the climate crisis. It's like, to get through that, we've got to get bigger and bigger and bigger as a movement and deeper, to be able to finally win in that thing. And it's scary because again, we're just kind of running out of time. So we were a founding partner in MCAN, and that has been a turning point for us, really. One of the other founding organizations there is called Maine Youth for Climate Justice. And I think there were 5 organizations, 4 kind of more adult-led mainstream organizations, and Maine Youth for Climate, MYCJ, we call them. And being in space with these kids and early 20s, some high school kids, you start to realize like who's got the moral high ground here. And these kids were, they were demanding shorter timelines, faster change, and really looking at this through a justice lens, like this notion of a just transition. I don't think I ever even heard of that until I heard it spoken by all of these youth activists. And they're also like just audacious, and they're not afraid to take on, what adults, were telling them, oh, you can't do that. Like Maine's retirement fund will never divest from fossil fuels because it's written into their bylaws and blah, 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 that they have to do whatever. And the kids are like, well, we don't really care. We're going to do it anyway. And damned if they didn't, in 1 year, get Maine's, over $1 billion in investments in Maine to divest from fossil fuels. First country in the state to do it. And it's just because these kids said, like, well, who says we can't? And we also have Chloe Maxman here, who started the divestment campaign at Harvard. And she was like a real source of inspiration. So, so the youth are really kind of ideologically leading our movement here in Maine. And I think that's been like a source of incredible power. If you get 100 youth to show up in Augusta, the governor will talk to them. And it's really their future. And it's not up to us to sort of decide how that's going to go. So CEBE's really kind of transitioned, and we even rewrote our mission a couple of years ago to focus from climate action from a sort of technical standpoint to more climate justice, to this notion of a just transition. And I think the real core of that is the people who have done the least in the world to cause this crisis are the ones that are suffering the most. And we have to put, our attention as we try to solve this problem onto those frontline communities, people of color that are living in neighborhoods with fossil fuel infrastructure coming through, breathing this polluted air, all of that, the indigenous communities on the front lines of these pipelines out west. These people are like fighting for their survival. We can't get them into the greater, movement of positive change unless we can lift them up from this, kind of these battles for their survival. The same goes for look at Central America, look at Sub-Saharan Africa. The climate crisis is just wreaking havoc in these places where people who have, countries that have burned less fossil fuels, in their entire life than the state of Connecticut. I mean, there's like just this injustice and inequity that's going on is profound. And then, you know, when those refugees, those people have to leave those areas, like in Central America, there's a whole 3 countrywide, you know, the dry zone, they call it, where that people can't live their subsistence lifestyles anymore. They try to go to the cities. There's like, you know, there's all sorts of gang violence and, you know, struggling for resources, and they come to this country and then they get turned away, when it's really this country and other Western, you know, Northern and Western countries that are the cause of this crisis. And we, you know, we understand it, we see it, the science is there, you know, the international community gets it, but we're still not acting on it. And that's, you know, it's just tragic. And those same people, again, they have this knowledge in their cultures about how to live, you know, what Owen was so beautifully describing as this harmonious relationship with their place. You know, we've begun to work more with some of the tribal communities here, and you know, you start to understand it's a different way of, it's not about resources, it's not about using resources effectively and efficiently, it's about being part of that system that you know, we're losing it all over the world. Indigenous folks have a small percentage of the land on this planet, and they foster 80% of the biodiversity. And we need that knowledge to be part of our, you know, how we move forward. A recent, you know, one of the things with permaculture too is this notion of emergent strategies. It's like of creating the conditions for things to happen, not forcing the things themselves, but, you know, this kind of notion that if you create the right conditions, then good outcomes will happen. We just did this project here. CEBE was part of a network that was leading this thing. It was called the Maine Food Convergence Project, still going on. And we did this, like, we wanted to do a big event, but we didn't want to bring in experts to tell everybody what to do. We wanted to really have this emerge from the entire food community in Maine. So we did this huge survey. We got like 500 people on the survey. We did all these like listening sessions around the state, and we kind of brought over 300 people together, all virtually, unfortunately, with COVID. But and what came out of that was nothing that anybody could have really foreseen or planned. It emerged through these dialogues and these conversations. We trained facilitators. Probably the most important thing we did was train facilitators to facilitate these conversations, to really make sure that we were hearing from as many voices as we possibly could and coming up with the right questions. And one of the things that rose very quickly was this relationship to our Indigenous people here, and that right relationship that they have with the land, and how we need to support them so that we can all learn from them. And this is so fascinating to me. This year we joined the Environmental Priorities Coalition, which is a coalition of most of the major environmental organizations here in Maine. And the number one bill, because they pick like 6 or 8 priority bills in the legislature, and then as a coalition we go hard on those bills. We leverage our memberships, we lobby, we write, we contact our legislators, we do the whole thing. The number one bill is our tribal sovereignty bill this year, and it just passed both houses. It will probably get vetoed by the governor, but things that, again, people could not imagine because of this kind of audaciousness, and also a bit of like, we just are running out of time, so people are just going hard and making relationships and building coalitions that were kind of unthinkable a few years ago. So that's been it's exciting, and actually we're having an event here next week, and our keynote speaker is a young Penobscot activist and scholar who's going to talk about that that bill and this relationship to the land. And we're starting to talk about ways to put some of our public lands at least back in the hands, in the control of the tribes here, to steward and kind of regenerate that land. The other issue that has just been front and center in the movement lately is just climate anxiety, especially in our youth. We're seeing like a lot of talk about that, and we have this youth panel coming on Saturday, and we said, like, you guys put together the panel, decide what your theme's going to be. The theme is about climate education, because most of our kids don't really understand what's happening to their planet until they're much older. And then when they do, they're learning it in a way that, may or may not be like, fully about understanding the science, but they'll get with friends, or they'll hear a speaker, or they'll go to a workshop, or they'll read a book, and then they get fired up, and they get angry, and they get upset, and then they dive into the work, and they realize that after like working their butts off, as a volunteer for a year, that nothing's changed really in the end. And then there's this level of burnout, and so that's becoming kind of an issue in the movement, that where like there's more and more workshops and more people. There's even like special like counselors that are counseling people on this stuff, and how do we live again with this idea that that the world is falling apart, and then and especially like teenagers, it's like, how do they keep like have a teenage life? How do they enjoy the things that we all were able to enjoy and develop as human beings in their teens, when they're faced with this kind of crisis? So one of the things that has come up a lot, in these conversations, is like most people, and and Owen, I think you're, just such an example of like, where do we go for like to counteract all of this? And it's like, go into nature, go like find that relationship with the natural world, because it's so profoundly beautiful, and there's so much to learn from it. And to a point, it's so true, and that's certainly where I go. But then there's this flip side, like, as if you're in this work full time, it's like you start to just be looking at like, whoa, there's certainly a little less, there's less insects, and those birds that used to come through, there's less of them, and you start to just look around. It's like, well, it's this is happening, that's happening. Seasons are changing, it's raining in February, it's like all these things. So it's, so you really kind of can't escape just by, just going out for a hike kind of thing. And with the youth too, it's like, we've obviously, you can't expect youth to, do this for nothing. So this, there's a lot of stipends, and a lot of the youth are picking up gig work, and they're, get paid for this a little bit here and there. But they're also, especially the kids coming out of college, are just so strapped. So the stresses are just compounded on them. And a lot of them are just having a hard time coping with that. And then if they get into like the full-time, some of them have, gotten some pretty nice full-time jobs with some of the bigger environmental organizations. And then they don't have the opportunity to like just stop for a while. So there's this kind of like, how do we keep this movement healthy and strong and moving forward? And, which kind of brings us back, like, how do we simultaneously embrace, this profound beauty in nature, and knowing that, its biodiversity is just crashing, all around us. And, this planet's ability to sustain life is in greater peril. It's like every day, it's like, how do you balance these two things? And, to a certain degree, it's like action, right? We find hope in action. That's, right straight from Greta Thunberg. It's like, you can't sit around and just freak out. You've got to do something. And we begin to understand that, we have agency as humans, and no matter if we're, 10 years old or 100 years old, there's stuff we can do. And that's that kind of like, there's times when we just need to resist. We need to like get in front of that, pipeline. We need to, fight against, fracking in our communities, or whatever that thing is that's local. There's always something. And then there's like solutions. It's like, try to find solutions, model solutions, ride your bike, grow a garden, put some solar panels up. There's so many things we can do to model, and also, do that tiny little piece that Dean was talking about, like at every scale. We can be fighting for, the immigration crisis, it's a global scale, and we can be, working on, growing some of our food in our own, backyard or whatever. And then I think it's just incumbent that we just have to find a rhythm of where we can have renewal, whatever that is. I was really lucky, and it was just kind of this weird thing. I've been teaching permaculture for a long time, and I had a friend who came here. Oh, and I don't know if you ever met Phil Hawes. He was the eco-architect. He came here and he talked about, he was the architect of record on the biosphere too. And he came here and talked about Eco Village Norway, and we became good friends. He spent a winter here. He's in his 80s. He camped out here for a winter in this little camp, and he was driving cross country and found himself in Fairfield, Iowa, at the Maharishi University. It turned out they have a permaculture program there, and he calls me up from the road one day and say, "Hey, Scott, you want to come out to Fairfield, Iowa, and teach permaculture with me?" And I'm like, "What's in Fairfield, Iowa, Phil?" And it's like, "Oh, this, Maharishi University." And I was like, "You got to be kidding! Like, really?" And sure enough, I'm like, "Well, this sounds amazing." And I couldn't take the whole month, but I took a couple of weeks and went out and taught this class with him. But to do that, I had to learn Transcendental Meditation, and they had me trained. And as I started to meditate, I realized, wow, this is really helping kind of with that, managing all of that. And then I got out there and I started teaching, and the Maharishi came up with these called the Principles of the Science of Creative Intelligence. And they were on the board in this room, where I was in my classroom. I started to look at these, and I was teaching all these permaculture principles, the David Holmgren 12. And I realized that some of them were like almost mirrors of each other. That people like the Maharishi and these Permies had looked really, really hard into like the fabric of life. And they both, and it's, obviously in so many traditions in the world, these same things come up, and, things like, embrace diversity, and, like diversity and resilience. And then this notion of just like kind of drilling down and going deep instead of fast, and getting to that, like, that kind of understanding this kind of connection of everything. And, for me, it's always been like getting on skis, or getting, running through the woods, or on a beach, or, riding a bike or something. And just lately I've been able to sort of get that same thing from, more like for a lot of people, it's slower, meditation or yoga, but anything that we can do to kind of slow down that time, get into that flow state where you're neither looking back at the past and all the mistakes we've made, which is what we do in the climate movement, or we're looking forward at like the pending disaster, instead of like just taking it all the way down to being like 100% in that present moment, where we can, feel like our full-on humanness and our connection to and interconnectedness and interdependence of everything around us. And that's the thing that I think is going to help us through here, and give us that, keep our momentum going. And then, just keep talking about it. So we're going to do this next week. If anybody has a wild hair and wants to come up to Maine, we're going to have a 3-day climate convergence here in Norway, where we're going to be talking about all these issues in community and sharing food, and we can do it outdoors under tents. And we're going to play music and share food, and, celebrate our networks and how much we've done, and then just try to like build that strength for the road ahead, because it's a long and winding one. So thanks for all your time and being here and everything that you guys are doing. And you're church sounds amazing, and glad to answer any questions.
Wow.
Thank you, Scott. That was wonderful. I have a lot of things I want to talk about, but this is the moment that I put up this little very hypnotic thing. It's a beautiful basket from Uganda that I bought at a craft fair one Christmas. And this is to let you know that we depend on your support to make these programs happen, to keep this building afloat, and to keep our community healthy and strong and looking towards the future after 102 years young that we are. So in the chat, there's a website where you can go and you can do credit card or PayPal. There is also the address of the church where you can send checks. Thank you so much, Scott. We'll come back
Thank you,
after
Scott.
Owen and have a little talk with you, okay? Owen,
What?
first of all, I want to ask you something.
Yeah.
Sure.
That's a house finch, Carpodicus mexicanus. Yeah, we actually have them up in here in Eastport. There was one of those singing out the window this morning while I was eating breakfast, and I rolled up the window. I was like, "Oh God, please give me more of that song, Mister House Finch."
House Finch.
The only
Thank
reason
you.
they're House Finch.
Every
The only
chance,
reason-
every
yeah,
chance
the
I
only-
get, I want to bend your ear about
problem.
birds and birdsong. That's all. I know
yeah.
that you know so much, and
Well,
you're
yeah.
so inspired by it.
Yeah, and the thing is, house finches are not from New England. They're from the Plains states. And it was only through forest fragmentation that they were able to make their way up here. And now they're like a part of the landscape here in balance, except the little bit of pressure that they put on the purple finches, which are native to New England. But anyway, they're an awesome species. I love them. They're part of a group of birds that I'm very fond of, who are basically granivorous birds, vegetarian. It's so funny because with time I've become more and more gravitated towards sparrows and away from predatory birds such as peregrine falcons, which was my favorite bird in 8th grade. Like everybody's got to make a living. I know that. But anyway, do you want me to do a song?
Absolutely.
All right. So just let me say that crows are a ubiquitous species of bird that we all know very well. And when I was growing up, we had Heckle and Jekyll, but nowadays and forever, crows during this time of year, the hormones come up in them and they get involved with nest building and breeding, and they split off into pairs. And you'll see some tussles going on between one crow family and another crow family. They'll be chasing each other and establishing those territorial boundaries. But in the fall, they all get together and they go into giant communal roosts. And in these, you'll find like 5,000 or 10,000 crows all hanging out together for the entire winter, in a kind of communal way. So they're able to set aside their differences, and be part of a bigger community, which is, it's what it's all about. This is a brand new song. Blacker than black, shiny and smart, on the trash can in my neighbor's yard. Water is there in the contour top. He dips and tips back another gulp. Woo! He's been watching me walk, decides it's time to open his wings for a flap and glide onto the grass a safer distance away. Trust but verify is what they say. We think we know what's going on in the animal brain. loons are there in a nearby tree, cawing punctuatedly. Almost a gang here in the town. Teenage crows with the feathers still brown. Woo! Working the angles, strutting the street, cast a beady eye toward the people they meet. They own this place, they always will. The jet black wings are the kings of the hill. Woo! We think we know what's going on in the animal brain. Thank you, Dean.
Oh
Yep.
yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah, crows.
That's
I
right.
love crows too, and I have a joke for you. It's
Uh-oh.
it's my best like 12-year-old boy joke that my boy taught me about 15 years ago when he was 12.
All right.
And, do you know that you know, you drive along and you see a lot of different kinds of roadkill, you know, and like cars are killing all kinds of animals, but you almost never see a dead crow from roadkill. And you know why that is?
Yep, I do.
Oh, you've
Why?
heard it, huh?
No, why?
The reason is that there's a crow up in the tree and he's going caw caw.
He's from Boston.
Hey, thank you, Scott, for your talk. I want to tell everybody that some of the photographers that Scott mentioned are well documented here as part of this enormous treasure of books that we inherited from Bob Datilio. He was seriously into photography and art and collected enormous number of coffee table size art and photography books. He was especially interested in photographer Tina Modotti, who was an Italian immigrant to the United States, who then went with Edward Weston, who left his wife and 4 kids, and they went to Mexico, and he was her assistant until she became very much an accomplished photographer herself. Anyway, there's a ton of Edward Weston books. Tina Modotti is well represented. There are like 3 or 4 feet of books about Tina Modotti.
Wow.
And then there's Elliot Porter, Ansel Adams, and I think my favorite is named Sebastião Salgado, who's a Brazilian. This church now is a place to come and be inspired by great photography in the early 20th century. It's a marvelous thing, and I hope it really becomes a magnet. And I invite anybody that is on this call or on this YouTube broadcast to come in on any day that Crystal and I are here. Generally, it's Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and browse through our mess of books that are somewhere between bookstore and library. We haven't completely figured it out yet, but we are slowly moving them out of the auditorium into different places. Another thing I want to mention, Scott, is that Margaret Randall just spoke at Community Church back in December. And yeah, had a lot to say. And so did you know Margaret in New Mexico?
So she came and spoke at my opening for my master's thesis, because she was in Albuquerque at the time. She had just been allowed back in the country. She was forced out of the country there for a while. I'm sure she probably talked about that. Wasn't allowed to return because she had taken up with the Nicaraguan folks.
Yeah, if any of folks are interested, Margaret Randall's talk is on our YouTube channel, as is everything that we do on Sunday mornings and occasional Wednesdays. Again, remind folks, Bill Mollison, is that an I or an E? Molli or E?
I, Mollison, yeah.
Who's a great exponent of permaculture and can be found interviewed by Scott on the CEBE website. And I'm going to go look for that myself. And again, and you mentioned Susan Meiselas, who I have her book at home. And I think that would be a good one for me to contribute to Community Church, to add to our enormous photography library of books. So this is just very exciting. And,
hey, Dean.
I feel like I'm in the right place, Dean. All these people that you keep talking about, it's like, oh, I ended up in the right place to talk about this stuff.
Absolutely. Well, I hope someday for both of you that we can receive you physically, because this Zoom stuff is beautiful in a few ways, but mostly gets old, and we need to be together. And I invite folks to be together with us. I had an idea, another idea. We're going to start something on Wednesdays. It's going to be called Pupusa Palusa. And the reason is that Luis, our cook, who maybe I should say another word about later on, but he is from El Salvador. And he does not make pupusas. He makes other Salvadoran dishes, but pupusas are made in restaurants in Chelsea where he lives, and they cost $1 a piece. And it's an easy way to invite people to come have pupusas with us on Wednesdays and talk about books, and get a tour around the 5 stories of this building and talk about Community Church and who we are and what we represent, and get you to join. We have a membership book. And you don't even have to attend. You don't have to ascribe to a set of dogma. Here we are for you. I want to invite folks to put questions in the chat, or to put your hand up in the little virtual hand that you can put up to talk to Scott, or to Owen. Owen, go ahead.
I got something. So I'm part of the Eastport greenhouse over here. And I was over there the other day planting some onions and leeks and stuff, and in the outdoor beds, because there's an indoor bed too. And a woman came in who I didn't know, with a younger woman with her that I also didn't know. It turns out they're from this kind of a school called the Wayfinder School, or it's some kind of a school that's more interested in different types of alternative learning and subjects. And they came in, and this high school senior, Autumn, and her teacher, Fern, were going around because Autumn's doing her senior project on gardening. And they started asking me questions, and I said, well, I'm into permaculture. And, they asked me, well, what is permaculture? And I realized, that I can't possibly, I don't have a good definition of permaculture, except, I said something along the lines of, when you're growing with permaculture, you're returning nutrients to the land. And, if I pull up a dandelion, I'm going to put that dandelion back into the ground, as I'm going to chop it up and put it back in the ground, is because it's a bioaccumulator. And, I was talking about it from that perspective, but I realized that I do not have a working definition of permaculture. I understand that it's a very broad characterization, but Scott, is there any way that you can boil it down into a couple of sentences or paragraphs, you who are a permaculture master?
Well, first of all, I would never call myself a permaculture master, Owen. And,
okay, you're getting there.
Yeah, but it's really hard. And when I teach permaculture, I have a whole pages of definitions that we kind of go through to look at the way different people have described it. But it's really and a lot of people, I think, misunderstand that it's beyond food production. It's beyond just landscape management. It's really about building sustainable systems. It's about like
Building sustainable systems.
building sustainable systems that work within our ecological footprint.
Yep.
Kind of, and it's really rooted in emulating nature, like looking at how natural soul and trying to create systems that provide abundance for humans and non-human life that that function in the same way. Like one of Mollison's things is always like, look into the forest. There's no inputs there. It's just sun, but somehow those forests have become this like super abundant, thriving ecosystems for,
Yeah, and we know why.
Yeah. So yeah.
Okay. Yep.
And I think the debt to indigenous, wisdom is becoming more and more understood all the time. That when Europeans wound up on the United States, what is now the United States and North America, this was an entirely coast to coast managed ecosystem where human beings were an integral part and saw themselves as a relative of every other living and non-living thing on that landscape.
That's right. Yep.
But it was a giant food forest, and we were so, like, the Europeans were so ignorant that they couldn't even see it. They thought it was a wilderness, but it was, that part of that wildness was the humans that were also part of it and integrated into it in such a seamless way that they couldn't even see it.
Wow. Yep. You're so true. That is deep.
I think one thing that, since, when Mollison and Holmgren kind of named it permaculture, it was like permanent agriculture. But I think very soon you saw Holmgren and others kind of translate that into permanent culture and started looking at all aspects of the built environment and humans' interaction with the planet.
Love it. Thank you.
When I think of permaculture, I think of a place I've been obsessed with for a long time. It's called the Land Institute in Salina, near Salina, Kansas, West Jackson. And basically what they're trying to do is go from the premise that agriculture as it is done in the United States is wrong in the Midwest. There used to be that much topsoil. Now there's this much topsoil, and how much longer can that last? It all goes down the Mississippi River, and it's all polluted with chemicals, creating a dead zone the size of France or something down in the Gulf.
Yeah.
And that's not okay. And it's the premise of the Land Institute, and they're trying to figure out how to get away from till agriculture and replace it with perennial agriculture, which is an amazing thing. And above and beyond that, it's a bunch of nerdy scientists, but also it's a place that's filled with a lot of incredible culture and music. And they have this prairie festival. I haven't gotten a chance to go, but I still want to go. They have tons of great speakers, including recently Michael Pollan, who I just sent you all on the chat a wonderful quote that says, what does it say? Eat food, not too much, mostly plants. And I think if we took heed to that, it would be an enormous part of the solution. Unfortunately, a Chick-fil-A just opened next door, and they're about the supply chain of chicken manufacturing and agriculture and CAFOs. What's that? CAFO? What does that mean? Whatever it is, and it's
Kentucky Fried Chicken, KFC.
No, CAFO. CAFO is called something feeding operation, consolidated feeding up. It's they do pigs, they do cows that way.
Oh, okay,
it's just
yeah.
a bajillion of the same animal all together in industrial conditions. It's a sorry, sad thing.
You see it in El Paso.
Oh yeah.
Iowa has 3 times as many pigs as humans, and you never see a pig in Iowa.
But
Because they're all
the pigs
indoors.
smarter than humans.
They're all indoors.
The pigs are smarter, aren't
That's
they?
right. That's right. Pigs are smarter. That's right. Pigs are smarter. That's right. Pigs are smarter. Smarter than a man in every way.
And when you call a cop a pig, you're insulting pigs.
That's right.
I agree with you.
I said that more than once about Donald Trump in the last 5 years. It's an insult to pigs, who are amazing animals. There was just a couple of really cool documentaries. One was about a pig farmer, like I think in Vermont, who became so enamored with his pigs that he finally couldn't do it anymore, and he slowly let go of that kind of agriculture. And the other one was also about pigs, and they had a great sort of observation about, especially about pet pigs or domestic pigs that you just have. They say that dogs look up at you. They look up at you and they want to please you in every way. Cats look down at you, whereas pigs look you straight in the eye and you're their equal and their peer. I love that. This was 2 documentaries they just showed on PBS. Well, I have an announcement that Eli Sussman, who is in the auditorium here with me, has, and I'm putting it in the chat. It's an event called "A Healthy Mind is the Greatest Treasure to Find." Visit us to learn about how to keep your mind healthy. It's a 4-hour symposium tomorrow at Mass General Hospital, Monday, April 18th, 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. And I'll put the details about the location and the information email in the chat. A healthy mind is the greatest treasure to find. Thank you, Eli, for that announcement. And it's in the chat. Let's see, there's some other stuff that I saw in the chat. Beatrice asked for Scott's organization address, and that one, that's in the chat as well. We will save this chat and put some of the information and the links on the YouTube. The YouTube notes or comments under the YouTube live stream. It includes the GoFundMe page for Tommy Rosa. It also includes the obituary for Carolyn Poinelli. We will be talking more about that. Yeah. Folks that just joined, that Carolyn Poinelli has passed away. Just a important, longtime voice in our community and the community of radical activists in the city. Just present at so many events, and just Carolyn, we miss you. We miss you. I don't see any more questions in the chat, or I don't see any hands up. So we're coming to a logical conclusion to our event here. We are so grateful to both our presenters today, Oen Kennedy, and you can find his music online and lots of other places. I see somebody's hand, Galaxy. Might that be Dan? Oh, take it away. Unmute yourself.
I think it'd be great to have a memorial for Carolyn. I think we should in the future. Also, Earth Day Friday, Copley Square, Park Street to Copley, being done by Mass Peace Action and Extinction Rebellion and other people. And I think it'd be great if people make it. It's Friday at 1 o'clock. I think they're leaving Park Street an hour later, but starts at 1 Park Street, and they're marching to Copley. And these are people not happy with what's going on. Also, there's a tax day event going on. I forget what day. I think it's the 18th. I could be wrong about that. That's Mass Peace Action working on that. So 2 events this week for people to get political on the streets of Boston. And then May 1st is Boston May Day, but I'll tell that next week. But I think this week, the tax day event, I think it's the 18th. And then there's the big one will be the Earth Day rally, march and rally.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
right.
And
Oh, and you got your guitar out. Any chance we get one more out of you?
Well, I was just gonna play this a sound on the guitar, but if you want me to play a little something, I can.
Well, a sound would be fine, or whatever you come up with, and we'll call that our what's it called in church? They call it the music to file out the door.
Recessional, process. I don't know what it is. Yeah.
Something.
Okay. Today I met a boy named Freedom. He stood up tall and he looked me in the eye. Down in the Albany, Georgia jailhouse, he said, I'm 9 years old and I'm ready to die. What are you ready to die for? Freedom. Why did they arrest you and bring you to the jail? He said, I was walking down the street, loudly calling and singing my name. Don't shy away from freedom calling. Stand up for love when the world is falling. When the world is falling. Today I met a beautiful woman named Rosa. She stood up tall and she touched the sky. Down in Montgomery, Alabama, she kept her ground so she could testify. What are you keeping your seat for, Rosa? Why did you decide that today was your time? She said, I was tired of going in through the back door. And if they want to, they can go ahead and call it a crime. Don't shy away from freedom calling. Stand up for love when the world is falling. When the world is falling. When the world is falling. Freedom, 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 freedom. Freedom, Richie Havens, freedom, Richie Havens, freedom, Richie Havens, freedom, freedom.
Owen, love you, man.
Love you too, brother.
Thank you,
Dean.
Owen. Thank you, Scott.
Hi, Dean, this is Alan. I'd like to just pipe up before
That's
we
a
end.
mockingbird.
Mockingbird?
Yeah. Yeah, Mimus polyglottis. You'll notice that it will do like a variety of different songs and sounds, but that first one you played is actually one of his own. It is not an imitation of any other bird. That was pretty short for a mockingbird song. I don't know what happened to the rest of his song, dude.
Well, thank you for all your bird IDs. And thank
Got
you
it.
for joining us both. I think that Alan, we were just closing, but go ahead, Alan. You're unmuted. Go ahead.
I thought you were wrapping up pretty quick there. Yeah, I just wanted to say hello to everybody. And Scott, this is Alan. I'm up in Maine. And Scott,
Oh.
I'll try to be in touch. I wonder if you can give your website. Just I know Dean said he put it in the chat, but or
I
the YouTube
popped
thing,
it on the chat. I put it on the chat. It's
Can you
www.
just say it? So just so it's part of the audience?
Yep, www.ecology-based-economy.org.
Great.
Ecology-Based Economy.org. Okay.
Yeah, I'll try to be in touch. I lived up close to Bangor, not too far from Bangor.
Well, I'm
But,
in Eastport. Yeah.
Oh, so
I think,
Owen, we're talking.
Scott is already gone,
Yep.
Alan.
Oh, I see.
But yes,
Okay, so I'll get that through.
www.ecology-based-economy.org.
Great, thanks, Owen. Yeah.
All
Yeah,
right.
you
Great.
betcha.
Thank you.
All
Okay.
right.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
Dean, thank you so
Owen,
much. Yeah.
Will you real quick send me your address in the chat?
My physical address or my email address?